Everything for me started with radio. I'm the music director at WRIU. And I guess the first time I heard Zydeco, Chris Strakowitz from our Hooley Records sent me a package of music. And specifically at that point I was interested in Beau Soleil because they were going to be coming up to play at the Old Cajun Bluegrass Festival. So I got that, and you know, that was exciting because most of the Cajun music I had heard prior to that was really scratchy, foreign sounding music. But Beau Soleil had something going where they really updated it and sounded fresh. But in that package was all these early CDs of Clifton Chenier. And when I first heard that, that really caught my ear. I mean, that was really an exotic sounding music. It was accordion driven, but it was blues, it was jazz, and it had that Louisiana funk to it. And when I heard that, I said, man, that's the greatest stuff I've ever heard. And actually still, 25 years later, I still think Clifton Chenier is the greatest Zydeco artist I've ever heard. So I heard that, and that really caught my ear. And I incorporated that into what I do in radio. I took over booking the Old Cajun Bluegrass Festival in 1985. So I knew I was going to be booking the show for that Labor Day weekend in '85. Went down the prior February, which would have made it '84, or actually no, earlier that year, '85, for Mardi Gras. George Thomas, who's a friend of mine at Rounder Records, decided, let's go do this thing. And it was the first time I'd ever been on a plane. First time I'd ever really made a trip. So we just said, yeah, let's go for it. And we went down there. I called Mike Doucet, who I had developed a friendship with, and you know, he paved the way for us for a lot of places. So we just kind of headed down there, and I think we went down for 10 days and just figured we'd try to see and hear everything we could. And it was a great trip. I mean, it was just a trip I'll never forget. Just so many different things. We met so many people. It was kind of like we went down there as conquering heroes. People knew we were coming because Mike said these guys from up north are coming down, one from a record company and one from a festival. And they just kind of rolled a red carpet out for us. I've got a plaque on the wall, the honorary citizen of Eunice, Louisiana. They had this big ceremony. The mayor was there. They had us get up and give speeches. Yeah, it was just incredible. I got to see all sides of it when I went down there. You know, not only, you know, were we welcomed by all of these different people, but some people just really were leery of what we were up to. I mean, it was 25 years ago or so, or 20 years ago. It's still in the deep south in Louisiana, and the first, I think, couple of days we were there, people started coming by this. We were staying at a place called the Stone Motel in the middle of Eunice, Louisiana, and it was pretty much a dive. But it put us right in the heart of Louisiana, in the heart of where the music was. We were out late one night, I mean really late, I think 4 or 5 in the morning. And the next morning about 10 o'clock, somebody's knocking at the door. And you know, we were in no mood to talk to anybody or deal with anybody after only a few hours sleep, all hungover and whatever. So I go and get the door, and it's John Delafos. And he had heard that we were down there looking for bands, and I said, well, let's talk in the parking lot, because there was another guy with us too as well. But you know, I said, let's not wake these guys. They need their sleep. So we're out in the parking lot talking about, you know, the music and his desire to finally come up north. And after a couple of minutes, the guy who owned the Stone Motel came around the corner with a shotgun, yelling and screaming for me to get this guy off his property, that he doesn't allow those kind of people on his property, that's not the kind of stuff that goes on down here. And you know, that was a real shock to me. John knew exactly what was going on. John just kind of like looked at me and said, look, I'll meet you downtown, you know, in a little bit, but you deal with this guy. And this guy like just really got in my face about bringing a black guy onto his property, and you know, was just genuinely upset. And so we actually moved out of there the next day. And that was my first experience with that type of situation. Mike Doucet again had introduced us to Rockin' Doopsie. And we went and visited him at his house and talked to him. And he said, well, I'm playing later tonight at this place, Slim's Waikiki, so I want you to come see us. So I said, yeah, great, we'll definitely be there. So we drive out, and it takes us a while to find Slim's in the middle of Opelousas. It's just, there are no signs. It's the only telling sign were Christmas tree lights hanging off a tree out front of the place. And we saw all the cars, so we figured this has got to be it. So we go into the place, get in the door, and we look, and of course, we're the only white people there. Feeling a little conspicuous. So we pay our money and come in and look around, and we're just kind of getting really odd glances from people. It didn't feel comfortable. But we saw a table kind of out near the front, and we said, well, let's go sit over there. So we went and sat at this table, and we're totally ignored by everybody for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. The waitress kept coming by. We kept trying to get her attention, at least get a couple of drinks. And finally she said, well, no, you can't sit there. This table's reserved for somebody else. You got to move. So we moved over by the bar, stood there for a little bit. Nobody would pay attention to us there either. We couldn't get a drink. So we said, I think we're probably in the wrong place. George says, yeah, we better get out of here. So as we're making our way over towards the door, Rockin' Doopsie on the bandstand finally, sees us. And he goes, oh, by the way, I got some friends from up north who are here tonight, and they're coming to hear my music. Well, that same waitress comes over and says, well, you should have told us you were Doopsie's friends. Brought us right back to that table we were sitting at. They put a bottle of whiskey down on the table. They said, this is on the house. Whatever you want's free all night long. And then women in the place started coming up, asking us to dance. And it turned into, like old home week. But once they realized, we were there from up north, and, we weren't locals who were there looking for trouble, we were made to feel welcome. But there was a lot of that in the early years, just going on, a lot of suspicion. People didn't know who you were. And that was one of the really interesting things that I saw when we had our festivals back then. When I'd go down to Louisiana, there was a real strict division between the Zydeco musicians and the Cajun musicians. They didn't play together at all back in Louisiana. But when we'd get them up here to Rhode Island, they'd play together on stage, they'd jam together in the tents, playing at the dances at night. So it was really interesting to see those dynamics. Now, the things have changed a little bit down in Louisiana. A lot of black musicians are now welcome to play in places they weren't before. It was just really nice to have all these performers up here interacting. They could do things up north that they couldn't do back home. And then one of the things that happened after that is the performers started talking about a willingness to want to come up here and play up here more often. And, it was just uncharted territory back then. And what happened back then was, first it started with Beausoleil. Mike Doucet and those guys were really catching on in popularity. They were probably the first band out there to really get people excited. And, they said, well, look, we'd like to come up and do a dance. So we found this place in East Providence called the Holy Ghost Brotherhood Hall, which is a Portuguese social club. And we said, all right, well, let's try it. We'll split the take. Half, whatever comes in, you take half, we'll take half, and see if it works. And I think the first dance we did with them, we drew about almost 500 people. And after that, it was just a natural. We started bringing bands in every month. Queen Ida used to draw over. One night we actually closed the doors. We had about 700. This was before the fire laws. We had about 700 people in there, and we just said we can't put any more in here. It's not safe. And next thing I know, I see people climbing in through the windows. They were so desperate to get in to see Queen Ida. She was by far the most popular act that we brought anywhere. She just really had that appeal where she could come across to an audience who knew Zydeco music, but more so to somebody who had never heard Zydeco before. And she just had a charisma about her. I woke up in morning, looking for the little girl I love. I had been booking the the Cajun Bluegrass Festival. I started doing that back in '85 and did that up until 1997. But at the same token, though, we were also doing some California festivals as well. We were booking a Bay Area Cajun and Zydeco Festival, a Long Beach Cajun and Zydeco Festival. And I worked on a few other things. We had a couple of festivals down in Maryland. We had tried the Gumbo Jams. So I was doing stuff at a national level, and it got crazy. One summer we actually did 8 festivals, and it just got overwhelming. And some of the festivals were kind of marginal at best. So right around '97, things kind of reached a point where I said, look, I've just got to cut out the ones that don't work anymore and just really concentrate on the good shows. And circumstances kind of played into my hands that way anyway. The guy I had been working with at the old Cajun Bluegrass Festival out in Escaheg went bankrupt in '97. So the future of that looked pretty dim. And Mary Daub, who's a good friend of mine, who was the producer of the Gray Fox Bluegrass Festival, which back then used to be called Winterhawk, she and I had always talked about working together. And I had called her up and said, you know, it looks like the old Cajun Bluegrass Festival is dead. You know, the producer went bankrupt. Things just aren't clear for next year. And she said, well, you know, we've always talked about doing something. Maybe this is it. So we decided in 1998 to put on the first Rhythm and Roots Festival. And we did it 1 year at Escaheg. It worked really well. People seemed to get the idea. We decided the concept of Cajun and bluegrass was pretty narrow. And it limited, you know, some people would come and they'd hear Zydeco or they'd hear something else that we throw into the mix and they go, yeah, but it's not Cajun or bluegrass. So we came up with the idea of Rhythm and Roots. You know, it's a pretty broad title, a catchy title, and it just left the door open for us that we could bring in as much different music or different styles as we wanted to, and people, you know, couldn't quibble about what it was. And our bottom line, anyway, if it's good music, we want people to hear it. So we went ahead with Rhythm and Roots, and we moved it to Ninigret Park in 1999, and we've been there ever since. What we've done with Rhythm and Roots that I like to say makes it all work really well is that people just don't sit in one spot. They get up and they move around. You know, they come in, they'll grab a space in front of the main stage, and we've got music that goes there from noontime till about 11 o'clock at night. Straight through, no dinner break. We'll offer a chunk of 11 hours of music. Big dance floor right next to the main stage. So people that want to get up and dance, go do that. But from there, they can also go over to our dance tent, which we have clear on the other side of the festival, where we actually have a stage set up under a 60 by 120 tent with another huge wooden dance floor. And we have live bands playing under that from noon to midnight. So for the people who just want to dance, you know, they can go back and forth from either dance floor all day long. And there are people I know who do that. They come in and then they dance constantly and they don't stop. And then, you know, if they, of course, they need to refuel. So between that stage, the dance stage, and our entrance, we have a food court of about a dozen food vendors, everything from lobster dinners to Cajun Creole food, barbecue, vegetarian foods, pizza, you know, a great varied menu. And it's more of a juried type of food court. We probably turn down 50 to 60 food vendors a year, people who try to come in, and it's like if they don't meet specific criteria that we have, they're not getting in. So we have that, and then as they pass the food court, we have our music workshop tent, which to me is one of the hidden jewels of the festival. It's an area where we have performers come in, not basically in a performance situation, but just sit there and explain their craft. They talk about songwriting or talk about how they play the accordion, or we have fiddle summits where we'll put 5 or 6 different fiddle players together. You'll have an old-time fiddler with a Nova Scotia fiddler, with a Cajun fiddler, and you know, they'll sit there and talk about the ways their styles are different or similar. And it's a real up-close personal interaction. it goes back to the days of the old Newport Folk Festival. This is what Newport did years and years ago, back in the 60s, what made that festival what it was. They don't have that anymore. And I think there are just a handful of festivals around the country that still do what we do with these kind of workshops. You can ask questions, audience people can, participate. I've seen them come up and actually pick up the fiddle, the performer, let them play. There's that really great interaction goes on. The boundaries between the performer and the audience are removed. So that's, to me, the great jewel of the music workshop tent. And the other thing we do that's key is we have a family tent. We've always encouraged people to bring their kids to these festivals from the early years up until now. We've never charged for kids 12 and under. They've always been able to come in for free. And that is really critical to keeping your festival alive. I've seen a lot of festivals over the years that have just disappeared. The audience has gotten older and older. There hasn't been an influx of any young people. So we've tried to really focus on young kids and introduce them to the music. And that's what we do. That's a little different than most other festivals. Other festivals that have family stages or kids entertainment bring in jugglers and clowns and magicians and face painters and all that. And I don't want that at this festival. We bring in world-class storytellers. We've got some great storytellers in Rhode Island, Len Cabral and Mark Levitt. We bring in musicians to come in and play old-time music, play folk music, play rudimentary Cajun and Zydeco music for the kids. I want the kids to hear this stuff. We actually teach kids how to do basic dance steps in the family stage. So, the kids come in and they learn something. And it's really worked because now I see kids who, they were kids 15, 20 years ago, who are now back bringing their kids to these festivals. So that whole cycle has completed itself. And, they remember what a great time they had, and now they're introducing their kids to the same thing. So that's an important part of what we do as well. And then at night, we actually show films in the kids' tent, a Disney film early on, and then like a teenage film for later. Because when these kids come to the festival, they have a great time. We've got a playground right there also. I've seen kids go to other festivals and they're being dragged by their parents like, all right, can we go home now? I'm bored. They actually look forward to coming to this. And one of the big highlights of the whole day is we have a Mardi Gras parade for the kids late afternoon. We have a Zydeco band traditionally on stage about 5 o'clock. The kids have a workshop where they make Mardi Gras costumes and instruments, and the Hot Tamale Brass Band kind of leads them through the crowd, and you'll probably get about 200 or so kids in a big second line parade through the crowd, having a great time. And that's part of the spirit that we try to instill in these kids at the early age. And they're coming back as adults.